Hi, everyone. Welcome to week 3 of Leo season. I can't believe we're here already. I can't believe we're here already. I'm so excited. I'm so excited for what this week is going to bring. We're talking about our ego. We're talking about kind of controlling, managing our ego, finding a really positive relationship with the ego. And we're going to talk about really stepping into confidence and like a sense of royalty, and really embracing that that lion energy, that very royal, regal energy for ourselves. Let me pause and let me pour Kat in, who is scratching at the door. Poor thing. He was right on cue. We start talking about lions, and he's like, so this week, big invitations. I have a lot for you today. So settle in, get ready. The affirmation for this week is, I am meant to do things in a really big way. I am meant to do things in a really big way. Or it could be like, I am allowed to be too much. Or just be too much. Embrace too muchness. This week, we're really stepping into our sense of royalty. So to start, we're going to chat ego. Since we're considering what it means to step into king energy, we want to make sure that we have the ego in check right off the bat, right? So what even is the ego? We talk about ego a lot, but like, what is it? What's its purpose? A few weeks ago, I briefly talked about the super old school Freudian theory of the id, ego, and superego. And since then, I discovered this analogy. It's the id, ego, and superego is brilliantly described by Jonathan Haidt, the author of The Happiness Hypothesis, as like the horses, the rider, and the rider's dad. So say that there's like a horse and buggy, or a chariot, if you will, and the horses are like wild, and they're going super fast. I don't know how fast horses go, but they're going super fast, and then there's the rider, the charioteer, who's managing the horses, and then also in the back is the charioteer's older, critical, wiser father. So where the horses are the id, or that really primal piece of us, that piece of us that wants to eat, sleep, and fuck, that's the horses that would go crazy, and that would have apparently no real clear path, and they just like ride right off the fucking side of a cliff if it wasn't for the ego, the rider, the charioteer, who is keeping those horses in check and keeping them on a path and keeping them functioning the way that they need to. And then there's the charioteer's old father, who's quite opinionated and critical. That's the superego. I love that illustration because the ego really is, its purpose is to try to rein in the id, or our impulses, or our instinct, but it also wants to appease the superego at the same time. It's constantly juggling those needs, the needs of the id and the needs of the superego, and it's wanting to mediate the best it can. It can be kind of crazy sometimes. It's wanting to mediate the best in us and the worst in us, is often how we look at those things. We often have this very moralizing, know-it-all voice, kind of narrating or interpreting our lives and saying, evaluating us. And we consider that part of us so wise and the best of us. And then there's the crazy side of us, the kid in us, the it in us. And a lot of times we kind of associate that with the worst in us. And part of this work of managing the ego and enlightening the ego is about making this function a little more conscious, a little more on purpose. We're managing these sides of us without placing those sorts of labels of best and worst, and where we have a relationship with all of these sides of us. It's ring master shit. Like we're really reining it in and reining it in, right? We're balancing. We're making choices intentionally that tend to both our id and our super ego. So in a lot of ways, our ego, it makes up our sense of I, of who we are. It makes up our sense of our self-image, our perspective of reality, and how we show up in reality. The ego is the stories and beliefs and narratives, or it includes those beliefs and narratives about who we are, who we think we are. And the function of those narratives is really to keep us safe. The ego uses narratives and thoughts to keep us feeling safe. And what is safe is what we know. Now my cat wants out. Are you for real? I'm gonna let him out. I gotta honor the king in Leo season, right? 1 second. Thanks for bearing with me. Okay, so the ego keeps us, its function is to keep us feeling safe. And what feels safe is what the ego knows. What feels safe is what our brains can easily predict. And it does that, it keeps us safe by using narratives and thoughts. We're really sitting in the brain this week. We're talking, or at least right now, we're talking about a lot of like brain chemistry and brain function. So things like narratives like, I'm not good enough, people are doing better than me, others are more attractive than me, or others are more brave than me, others are so much more talented than me, I can't do what other people do. Or on the other hand, narratives like, I'm so different, they don't understand me, I'm totally different from them, or I am right about this and no one ever listens to me, no one ever cares about my opinion. All of those sorts of narratives are really about self-preservation, right? Or what feels like self-preservation. All of those sorts of narratives are like ego tactics to keep us in a safe square footage, in a safe space. We're trying to preserve our idea of ourself, trying to keep ourselves really safe, but self-preservation often requires or results in really being held back in a lot of ways, right? Really staying in this certain amount of square footage. All those narratives can really keep us stuck. Really, really impacts how we choose to show up. It's often very constricting. It really doesn't like expansion. The ego does not like expansion. And a key characteristic of the ego is that it separates itself from everything else in the world, right? I mentioned before that the ego really serves to differentiate what I means, capital I. This is me, this is not me. Lots of judgment, lots of othering ourselves. I really like that phrase. Yeah. So all of those sorts of narratives that fall into these like very ego categories, we can start to just acknowledge, like we get to have this, notice the thought and be like, oh, that's ego. That was ego. That was ego right there. And we get to kind of chuckle with it and notice how it's functioning, and then make a more conscious choice about what we're thinking or how we're going to approach a situation from there. So what does it mean to have a big ego? We talk about ego all the time, just in our day-to-day lives, right? We talk about the guy with the huge ego, or we talk about managing our own egos, or it comes up, right? So what does it mean to have a big ego? Often what we mean when we say that is somebody who's really stubborn, who's a jackass, who's closed-minded, right? Who's really conceited. And what does that mean? What does that mean? Really, a person who's in those sorts of energies, who can be described those ways, is just so sold on their own network of beliefs that are so strong that we're convinced that if anything else were to prove those beliefs wrong or contradict them in any way, like the world would collapse. Like you just don't allow that to happen. You don't allow those things to penetrate the ego, those things that might prove your beliefs wrong or contradict them in a way. We go into panic mode, trying to keeping our world from collapsing. And we sink into self-preservation in those times. So, like, for example, now, my chair's squeaky. I don't know if you can hear that. Now, we all sometimes have a big ego. I really kind of want to redefine what it means to have a big ego, or to be like kind of stuck in our ego, to where it doesn't just mean like egotistical in the sense that we might know it. Egotistical in that very jackassery, stubborn sense, right? We all have been in that energy where we don't allow things that contradict our idea of what is. We don't even allow those to penetrate. We resist them at all costs. For example, if you don't think that you have a God complex and somebody tells you that you have a God complex, what happens? Right? We get really defensive and we're like, nope, excuse me, fuck off. You're wrong. I don't have a God complex, and I know it. Oftentimes that's the tendency, where on the other hand, we could let that little tidbit of feedback into our ego bubble and like just take it for what it is and hear it out, chew on it for a minute and be like, oh, that's interesting that this person is bringing this to me. I like wonder what that actually means. Really, what having a big ego doesn't just mean being an asshole. Having a big ego could mean being in any sort of energy where we don't want to hear it, where we're it could be, you know, feeling really undeserving and really shitty about ourselves. I think that's big ego energy, because we're so stuck in our own narratives. Our ego is running the show and we're like unwilling to see outside of those narratives. That's what I think it means to have a big ego. So if when we kind of overcome that need for self-preservation, whether it's in like, I am better than these people, or it's I am worse than these people, or anywhere on the spectrum that you fall, remember, the purpose is to keep you where you are, keep you in the delusion of what you think to be true. The goal is to keep you safe. And we get to choose to kind of see outside of that, peer over that brick wall of ego, and make conscious choices to see beyond that. So what's interesting is that, like, that's exactly how we free ourselves from being so bound to the ego and so inside of the ego. It's in proving the ego wrong, being wrong sometimes, which is like the ego's worst fear, but it's by being wrong sometimes, or by proving the ego wrong and allowing our world to implode and our beliefs to collapse, that's what helps us to evolve into a new ego state, an expanded, did I say expand? I don't know what I said. I don't think it was correct. An expanded ego place, a more enlightened ego place. It'll be more comfortable, less neurotic, and like you'll be better able to perform. You'll be better able to show up in that place. So here's where, and we'll talk more about like bravery and courage in a little bit, but here's really where bravery and courage come into play. We have to be willing to be wrong. We have to be willing to prove our ego wrong. Remember, either way, whether we're falling on like the end of the spectrum that's very prideful and closed-minded about things, and I'm sure that we all have that quality in some ways, or if and when we're falling on the end of the spectrum of like feeling really undeserving and really othering ourselves from the rest of the world, and isolating ourselves and being down on ourselves, very critical of ourselves. Wherever we fall on that spectrum is ego. It's all ego. So as we do this juggling work between these horses and our dad, or the id and the superego, as we really balance all of this, we eventually learn to stop judging things so harshly. We begin to feel less isolated and less othered, and we feel like more oneness with the rest of the world. We feel more and more willing to experience pain, or willing to goof up and take messy action and maybe be disliked, and we're more willing to open ourselves up to the opinions of others. And I think an enlightened ego, being in this place, is really all about balance, balancing both taking ourselves super seriously and really respecting ourselves, and honoring that like I am one with the rest of the world. I am one piece of all of existence. Like that is, and the things that I am and the things that I do make an impact and influence the rest of the world, because we are all one, man. Like both taking ourselves so seriously and our path and our purpose so seriously, and also not so seriously after all. Like also being really willing to goof up and being really willing to be disliked sometimes, and showing up in messy action, both at the same time. I often speak about the brain like versus the soul, in a way, like the ways that the brain and our brain chemistry and our traumatic past and our reactions to the traumatic past really keep us separated from our soul, being like our really divine nature that came here to this existence on earth as a human to play and to fuck up and expand, and like really the fool in the tarot. the soul. I really talk about those two things. And for Leo season, we're going to talk about heart space, because Leo rules the heart. And when I was thinking on this, I was like, what is the difference, like, between the soul and the heart? Like, the soul is not an organ, and the heart is like an organ. Is that the difference? That, like, or does that make heart more similar to brain, because they're both human and they're both organs in this existence, whereas the soul is like, what is the soul? Like, crazy philosophical. And I was just reflecting on this, and I feel like looking at the heart is a new way of looking at soul work. I think the heart is the way that the soul communicates to us. It's how soul can speak human to us. It's where we can feel the soul in this lifetime. And in fact, I did a little reading and some searching on, like, the theories of the heart, and like the chakras, the heart chakra, and in the heart chakra is said to bridge earthly and spiritual aspirations. And I was like, oh fuck, I was kind of onto something there, where yeah, if the heart is here to bridge earthly and spiritual aspirations, and like it's the language, the human language of the soul. Ugh, I like that. So as we're learning to manage our ego and expand our ego state, and like at the same time, they go hand in hand, we're also learning to live from a very heart-based place. We're kind of learning to quiet down our old dad and like be with those wild horses a little more. That's heart-based. So the work for this week largely involves exploring your own ego and how it shows up for you, and learning how to manage it in a more purposeful, cognizant, intentional way, where learning to be cognizant of your narratives and how your narratives may be othering you in one way or another. Either you're better than others or you're way worse than others. Notice those narratives. That's number one. One for this week is learning to be cognizant of those narratives and cognizant of when you're othering yourself. Two is learning how your id, your impulses and your desires, how to honor those, how to be with that, how to listen to that, and how to get that id's needs met in a way that your super ego can be proud of and approve of. It's such a balancing act, because partially that means reining in these horses a little bit, but also it means like reining in your dad's tongue a little bit too. Like, don't be such a jerk. Don't be such a jerk to yourself. Your super ego can really stand to take it down a couple notches, I'm sure of it. We get to kind of choose to be proud of how we deal with things, right? Tell your dad. Sorry if that analogy of father is a little off-putting to some, but tell your dad, rein it in, bro. Like, I'm doing the best I can. Like, can you choose to be fucking proud of me, please? And I used to say this in my work as a therapist, when I would talk about id, ego, and super ego. I would often ask clients to kind of evaluate, like, is that even your voice? Is your super ego functioning from a you place, or is it functioning from like your parents or old pastors or old teachers, or like, who is that voice? Does it sound like your high school bully, or is it you? Because oftentimes it's not us. Oftentimes the guy who's in the backseat driving, telling us whether we're doing a good job or not, oftentimes that's not really our voice. Often it's some jerk. And then your third task for this week is I don't want to say your third task because, but part three of like really learning to have a good relationship with your ego is managing any forces within you that either tell you you don't deserve like to feel like a king, or that tell you that you're a way better king than anyone else, and that you are right, and that you don't need to take feedback or adjust a single thing. Yes. Let me take a little drink break. All right. So we're doing this so that we can feel really comfortable and confident as we step into a sense of royalty. And royalty means the most successful, famous, or highly regarded members of a particular group. So whatever part of you is a little put off when I say like you're gonna treat yourself like royalty, you're gonna treat yourself like you're a king or a queen, what it means is being the most successful, famous, or highly regarded members of a particular group. This means you're going to start regarding yourself more highly. You rule, dude, which could be another mantra. You rule. I rule. I rule. And what does that mean? What does it mean to rule? This simply means having authority over something. And I think it is so important to remind ourselves that, like, okay, I have authority over. You're an adult. You have authority over your life. I don't know how often we really remind ourselves of that or really sit with that fact. Like, oh, I am an authority. You are an authority figure. Do you think of yourself that way? I don't think a lot of people think of themselves that way. Sorry. So that being said, like I want you to take a moment and really explore, and this will be in the PDF for this week. If you had absolutely no worries, no weirdness around what you do or don't deserve, no judgment from yourself, you didn't have to worry about judgment from others, anyone else, what would it look like in your life that you have right now? What would it look like for you to step into king energy? What would a day in the life of king you look like? What would that look like? If you were Beyonce, what would you do? What would Beyonce do? Let this be fun. Let it be organic. Let it be outrageous. Dream a little. Let your inner kid play a little bit. Did you play Prince or Princess when you were a kid? I think a lot of kids do, probably. I remember playing Princess as a kid all the time. So let that part of you speak and dream for a moment. What would it look like if you felt like royalty? What would it look like from the moment you woke up to the moment you went to bed? How would you interact with your partner? How would you interact with your barista? How would you interact with your reflection in the mirror? What would your selfies look like? How would you interact with your bank account? How would you dress? What would you post on social media? Really think about it. If you had your same life, your same job, your same bank account, but if you really truly felt like royalty, what would those things look like? We get to play dress up with that. How fun. And it's not about anything in your life being different. You know, the barista might still be infuriatingly slow. Your partner might still take an annoying amount of time in the bathroom. You still might hate your clothes in your closet, and you still might need or want more money in your bank account. And given all of those factors, those really annoying factors, if you were royalty, if you were a king, how would you interact with those situations? Now, stepping into this attitude does take some bravery and courage and a sense of pride, right? So let's talk about those things for a moment. In a way, I'm asking you to both stop othering yourself, right? And also regarding yourself so highly that you are like royalty. So really what that means is that like everyone is royalty and everyone deserves the respect of royalty. And I think that's just important to note. Stepping into this takes courage. It's it's a brave thing to regard yourself in this way, given all the circumstances. And like, why is it so brave? Because of our super egos, because of our inner backseat drivers. We often feel really afraid to regard ourselves as that special because it's something in us is like, ah, what if we're wrong though? What if I think I'm so awesome and I'm the bee's knees, but the rest of the world just thinks I'm a silly goose? That's terrifying to the super ego. It's a terrifying idea to the unevolved ego. Um, to to have pride, meanwhile the rest of the world is like, why? That's a horrifying thought. But remember that the more we flex this muscle and remind ourselves that we are a silly goose, and that yeah, the world will see us in that way, and that's okay. We don't have to take it so seriously. I'm still Beyonce. The more we can embrace those facts, the easier this will all become. And the more you'll realize that you are both the bee's knees and a silly goose at the same time. And that's cool. So let's talk about pride a little bit. Pride is a feeling, a feeling of deep pleasure or satisfaction derived from one's own achievements or the achievements of one whom you're closely associated with, or from qualities or possessions that are admired. It's a feeling of deep pleasure or satisfaction. It's also a consciousness of one's own dignity. I like that definition. That one's a few definitions down. Consciousness of one's own dignity, being aware, holding, seeing, acknowledging one's own dignity. So let's sit with that for a moment, because many of us have really fucky relationships with pride. We don't feel like we deserve to feel pride, or we're afraid to feel too much pride. And I want to remind you, don't worry, you're not an asshole. You're allowed to feel so fucking proud. You're allowed to be consciously aware of your own dignity. I'm just trying to think of a different way to say it. You're allowed to really acknowledge your own dignity. You're allowed to feel deep pleasure and satisfaction from your life and who you are. Isn't that the goal? It's to find a way to feel pleasure and satisfaction in this life, and then also like help others do the same. That's the whole fucking goal. And so much of like existence in a way, right? And so many of us have such a fucky relationship with pride, and we don't feel like we deserve to feel pride. You don't feel like you deserve to have a deep feeling of pleasure and satisfaction from your life. You don't feel like you're allowed to be aware of your dignity. Fuck that. You're allowed to feel so fucking proud, and it's worth mentioning. A big characteristic of defining factor of Leo energy is that it is a fixed energy. So this does mean that we need to just be aware of or cautious of a tendency to be stubborn, or a tendency to struggle with flexibility, or a tendency to struggle with taking in feedback, right? Fixed energy isn't bad. There are 4 fixed signs. What is it? Taurus, Leo, Scorpio, Aquarius, I think, are the 4 fixed signs. It's not a bad thing. Absolutely not. It serves a purpose, and it exists in 4 of the signs of our system for a reason, right? Of course. We need people who can stand really firm and persevere and have a sense of stability to their core. I've heard fixed signs being compared to like the bowl that holds the ingredients. I think that's interesting. Like almost anything. There's an empowered version of fixed energy, and there's a disempowered version of fixed energy, right? So it's just something to be aware of, especially as we're talking about royalty and pride. So being just like objectively aware of that. Don't be so afraid to blur the line between pride and conceit. Conceit is when there's excessive pride. So explore for yourself. How can you manage that balance? How can you know whether you're being excessively proud? What outside of your own mind, what outside of your own superego and fear and narratives, what outside of yourself can cue you in to times that you may be experiencing excessive pride? Objectively, right? I think our superego gets really afraid to be conceited, right? As we talked about before, like, what if I think I'm so awesome and everybody else is like, why does she think she's all that? That's our superego talking. What outside of your superego can show you that that is actually happening? It probably won't happen. But really explore that. Like, how can you know whether you're being conceited or just having a healthy sense of pride? So make this a huge focus for your week. What would need to be true for you to feel proud every single day? Make it happen. Make that happen. It's about stepping into a sense of pride and royalty as your life exists, with your annoying partner and the barista who screws up and your bank account that could use a little more or a lot more. Don't let me tiptoe around that, because that's like a key factor in all of this work, is that is being able to embrace what I'm talking about, even given those factors, even if things are really hard, right? In fact, when it's the hardest is when it's most needed. How can you feel proud of yourself every single day, even given how your life is right now? What would need to happen for you to go to bed and feel proud? It's about doing those things and also choosing to be proud. And what's great about, I mean, like, spoiler alert, like, this really sets up some of the work that we're going to get into next week around finding more pleasure and being shameless. This is very foundational. It's very important. Hopefully, you're feeling pretty darn equipped to step into your power. Remember, like, Leo is all about letting yourself shine. It's about being bold. It's about embracing who and what you are and what you know, and allowing that to be seen by the world, allowing that to guide you. You get to treat yourself with the respect and the reverence of royalty. You get to learn how to rule your ego instead of letting your ego rule you. You get to really embrace your power and let the world see it. And if you find yourself doubting the importance of this, remember that it's this kind of work, and it's stepping into such a heart-centered place and such a courageous place. It's this kind of work that really has a ripple effect on the rest of the world. When we fill our cups so much that they're overflowing, the world benefits. When you step into a sense of pride and so much respect for yourself and so much respect for your purpose here and the imprint that you can make on your little world, holding that with honor and reverence is part of your purpose here. It's irresponsible not to do so. You deserve to be in that empowered of a place, and the world benefits by you doing so. It's selfish in a way to self-preserve and to just stay in that square footage, because the world will benefit when you break out of that square footage and like allow yourself to shine from your heart space. So I hope this was helpful. Let me know what comes up for you. I will see you very, very soon. Good luck. Yeah, I'll see you later. Take care.